Okay, so hi everybody. For those I haven't met, my name is Fusho. It's really nice to see everybody here in the Zendo and everybody online. For those that are new, and I guess for all of us, I just want to emphasize that this space is a real refuge. And this practice is a real refuge, but I'm just feeling so grateful that we have this community and this Zendo, that we can come and sit together and be here together. And I just want to remind us that it's a place that everybody's welcome. And it doesn't matter where you're from or what's going on or anything else, you're just welcome to be here. And I just really am feeling gratitude for this space right now. We've been saying this for a while now, but things are feeling crazy out there. And I think we all have different experiences, obviously, but it's just feeling like everywhere we look, we can find something to worry about these days. I mean, maybe that's always been true, but boy, for me, it's feeling a bit overwhelming for looking at what's happening in the world, but even just in our day-to-day, I think things are getting can be moving really fast and can feel really overwhelming. And so just a space to come be quiet, we can't underestimate that. I'm going to talk about one of the things I've been noticing, but I think there's all kinds of things to worry about. I've been reading and listening to Nicole Hannah-Jones lately, very recently. And for those that aren't familiar with her, she's the author of the 1619 Project and writes for the New York Times. And this is the bio that she wrote for herself. She specializes in deeply reported, argumentative, and explanatory writing that elucidates hidden and surprising histories to help us understand the divisions, polarization, and injustice that are endemic to American life. And she's a historian, I would say foremost, and a writer and a journalist. And I was at a conversation where she was one of the guests recently with a couple other journalists discussing authoritarianism and how to respond. But she says she gets to spend long periods of time researching, reading, and reporting in order to contextualize some of what we're going through and some of our nation's most deeply vexing issues. And her journalism has tended to focus on school and housing segregation, and most recently, attacks on affirmative action and other racial justice efforts, and threats to democracy and the issue of reparations for descendants of slavery. And she wrote recently in the New York Times in an essay about how this administration upended 60 years of civil rights in 2 months, very recently. And she warns us, it may seem unfathomable, but history provides a warning. In this country, when the circumstances are right, the fragile norms around race can be dislodged, and freedoms can erode and then evaporate. And so there's been some mandates and threats and coercions, and elimination of policies and cultural norms focused on integration and equality throughout government, education, and the private sector. Recently, this is happening now. And it's historically not new, but for many of us, it's the first time in our lifetime that something like this, I would say, has felt so present. And sort of, for me, the efficiency with which the civil rights and equality infrastructure of the federal government has collapsed has stunned the nation's veteran civil rights leaders. And so she's focused on sort of this being this harbinger right now and reminding us to stay awake. Maya Wiley, the president and chief executive of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, told her, "This is a full-on assault on all that we have gained in the last 125 years. Civil rights is the architecture of democracy. So the only reason you do this attacking on everything, is because you're trying to steal democratic power from people." And we are seeing a very powerful message coming from our administration as they systematically take apart the enforcement apparatus of the government, agency by agency. And the message is that our institutions, or to our institutions, that discrimination will no longer be punished. And the rights that we thought we had should not be taken for granted in so many different ways. And we're seeing institutions of government and education and corporations, law firms, feel threatened and sort of capitulate quite often out of fear. So Nicole Hannah-Jones was saying, she's a very revered writer and author and scholar, and for years has traveled to give talks and discussions and teach, and been invited to many universities around the country. And that just stopped. That just went away. She's no longer being invited to speak about civil rights. For example, that's one example. So we've arrived where the boiling water is happening. We're in the boiling water now. And I know it's very scary and disheartening, and that's not what I'm here to do, is just make us feel terrified. But we do need to bear witness. That's what our practice encourages us to do, first and foremost, to sit down and bear witness and really look, if we can, at what's happening, in our country, but more importantly, obviously, in our life. And we just want to acknowledge what's happening. And of course, we want to find balance. We don't want to be so terrified that we can't do anything. And we also don't want to put our head in the sand and just say, I can't take it. So that's the challenge, I think, is this balance. And luckily, this practice is the middle way. It has a whole history based in helping us and supporting us to find the middle way. And so we don't have to look far, especially when we're here in the Zendo, for some support and some guidance. And of course, when we're giving Dharma talks, there's always, not always, often a koan that we can point to and look at for some kind of support. And a certain koan came up in my life recently in multiple occasions, separate situations. So I thought I might as well take a look at that. This koan comes from the Blue Cliff Record, and it's case number 10, and it's called Mucho's Thieving Phony. It can also be translated as 4 shouts for Mucho. Mucho asked a monk, "Where have you just come from?" And the monk immediately shouted. Mucho said, "I've been shouted at you once, by you once." And the monk again shouted, and Mucho said, "After 3 or 4 shouts, then what?" And the monk had nothing to say. Mucho hit him and said, "What a thieving phony you are." Mucho's name in Japanese, by the way, is Bokushu. Just had to point that out. And he was also the one who had the great future Zen master Yun Men as his student. I want to explain a little bit about the shouting, if you're not a formal Zen student. So traditionally you go in and to show your understanding with a teacher one-on-one, and they say, what's your understanding, in very different ways they ask you. Or they can say, where have you come from? What have you learned? What's your insight? And this shout, which kind of came down the tubes as like a Kwatz, is what it became known as. It's like this belly shout that Zen adepts express the wordless truth they've realized when they have their koan. Because it's a way of showing, there's no way of giving it words, and I've had this enlightened experience, but you can't put it into words, and everything is one, and so I'm gonna just say Kwatz, or just yell, if you can't frame it in any other words. And so at one point, sometimes it's a way of expressing your experience or your insight. And so this teacher said, okay, so say it again, where have you come again, now what? And the student said, Kwatz, again, because he didn't know what else to say. And the teacher said, So yes, you shouted at me a few times now. So when you're done shouting at me, then what? And the student didn't have anything to say. And sometimes it's dangerous to take things literally in koans. But I think in this case, the teacher said, wake up, you're a phony. You don't have anything to say right now. And then he understood something. In the commentary, in the Blue Cliff record, they say, if it had been any of you people who had been asked by Mu after 3 or 4 shouts, then what? What is your understanding? What would you have said? I was thinking about wanting to shout at people who we don't agree with, or wanting to express why we're right, our own opinion, and why they're wrong, or what we know and what they don't know. Or even when we maybe have gained some insight, wanting to share that, how wonderful that is. I've got this insight. I think I understand, which is great. But then what? And the verse is 2 shouts and a 3rd shout. Adepts recognize the opportune moment to change. If you call that riding the tiger's head, the 2 of them would both turn out to be blind men. Who is a blind man? I bring it out for everyone to see. So adepts recognize the opportune moment to change. For me is the key here. And the middle way and the practice that we do here, and particularly literally the history of how the Village Zendo was founded, is based on that moment of what's happening right now, and how can I help, and what can I do, and how can I respond? Not what I thought I knew, or what I gained, or what insight hit me, but what do I need to do right now? And for some of us, that means make a meal, right? Change a diaper, go to work, hopefully be able to buy groceries. What do we do? What do we do next? Instead of being overwhelmed by the most amazing insight, or just overwhelmed, right? What can we do? And so we're supported by this practice in helping find an answer. Because first we sit down on the cushion in a quiet space, and we focus on our breath. and we notice how our mind works. There's another commentary, which I think is nice, of the Blue Cliff record. It's The Garden of Flowers and Weeds, Matthew Juksan Sullivan. And he says, that was a perfectly normal question. Where have you come from? And he got a reply as unusual as thunder and winter. The visiting monk can't or won't play the game of here and there, past or present. In his commentary on the case, Sui Tao says, this monk is riding the tiger's head. This means he's tasted something beyond himself, and he expresses it without thinking or pausing. Good for him. Sometimes there's nothing wrong with a good shout. Sometimes there's nothing wrong with a second shout either. If the first shout is pure, then why not shout again when challenged by words or ideas? But the teacher won't let the monk go, and he presses him further because he knew something that the shouting monk didn't. This is just one opinion. He knew that the enlightenment is not enough. Experiencing non-duality or unity consciousness or enlightenment is all well and good, but it's a sterile victory unless it's translated into something that can benefit the people around you. And that pivot from realization to action is the heart of Dharma. And, we chant our bodhisattva vows, and we include all sentient beings, and we vow to save them. So how do we do that? Well, I think we can look to our co-founders. The reason that we are able to sit here in this refuge, in this space, and be together online is because two women rolled up their sleeves and were interested in Zen and had practiced at monasteries, and then invited people to come meditate with them in their living room. And they just recognized this is easier to do when we do it together. It's a hard practice. And it turns out when other people do it together, it's a lot more support. That's community, right? And I would say that's sort of a way of just a simple way of recognizing this fabric that we're all part of. It doesn't have to be a gigantic thing, but saying, hey, do you want to sit with me? That's one example. Oh, and by the way, I put some coffee on. Would you like some coffee? Someone's got to put on the coffee. Like, I wouldn't want to underestimate that, for example. Particularly in community, I'm feeling is what's most helpful at the moment, I have to say. So Friday, speaking of these women, we're going to have a little celebration here, and you're all invited. There was a website that was created by a group of Zen working women, and one of them is here, and I think I saw one online. Oh, I see one there, yeah. She's waving. And we decided to put together a website focused on Zen women pioneers, inspired by our co-founders, and particularly Enkyo Roshi, our co-founder. And so we hope to expand this to other Zen women pioneers. But this is just a way of sort of recognizing what they did and how things were started and what that was like back then. I mean, and look at us now, and acknowledging kind of what that was like, and how, I would say, we say pioneers because they were looking at what was in front of them and they noticed a need, but traditionally this is such a male-oriented tradition, and leadership was all about the hierarchy and men, and that's how it was handed down. But Enkyo Roshi's strong belief from the beginning was that this practice shouldn't be delegated to just a few, and it should be available to everyone without regard to gender, race, or class. Her teacher and co-founder of the Zen Peacemakers took this to heart. That was Bernie Glassman. And they asked, what does inclusive community look like? Who are we leaving out? And he founded the Greyston Bakery, where they hired people of low means or no means, homeless people. They gave them jobs, taught them how to work and make a living. For example, she was helping him do all this while she was doing koans with him in her car, driving around, picking things up. And she founded the Village Zendo in the 80s. There was a gay men's health crisis. She told me she used to, there was a center for the gay men's health crisis, and she used to put her cushion on her bicycle, and ride over and offer meditation regularly. And she said she kind of, with doing all of that, she learned about social action on a gut level. And it taught her how service and taking care of others is the practice of life. And so it's the reality. It's not the idea of what it means or what I should be doing or what I should understand or what I can or can't do. It's really as simple as rolling up your sleeves sometimes and saying, oh, can I fix you a meal, for example, right? Or maybe I should change that diaper. How about we go sit together? How about I write about how I'm feeling? Or paint a picture, or create some music, or go to a march. These aren't small things. She reminds us that the Village Zendo is about opening our arms and serving people, having a practice place that is about collaboration. And she says, I think that the women as teachers roll up our sleeves and do what needs to be done. And what's important is that everybody have an opportunity to practice and to teach regardless of their gender or sexuality or race or financial situation. Every living being has something to offer others, and they should be allowed to do that. So that's my encouragement, is anything. It doesn't have to be large, it can be small. Don't underestimate it. Anything that's catching your attention, that you want to give your attention to, just do it. Maybe we can do it together. Please come sit at the Zendo. And find out what's going on the IO group. It's great. There's plenty of opportunities for us to do something together and to use our voices to respond to our lives. If you'll bear with me, I just want to read a poem in closing. It's kind of long, but it's worth it. You can just let it wash over you. It's called The World Keeps Ending and the World Goes On. And it's by Franny Choi. And Franny is currently teaching literature at Bennington. They are the poet laureate of Northampton, Massachusetts right now. And Franny was born in Minneapolis to Korean immigrants. So it's called The World Keeps Ending and the World Goes On. Before the apocalypse, there was the apocalypse of boats. Boats of prisoners, boats cracking under sky iron, boats making corpses bloom like algae on the shore. Before the apocalypse, there was the apocalypse of the bombed mosque. There was the apocalypse of the taxi driver warped by flame. There was the apocalypse of the leaving and the having left, of my mother unsticking herself from her mother's grave as the plane barreled down the runway. Before the apocalypse, there was the apocalypse of planes. There was the apocalypse of pipelines, legislating their way through sacred water, and the apocalypse of the dogs. Before which was the apocalypse of the dogs and the hoses, before which the apocalypse of dogs and slave catchers whose faces glowed by lantern light. Before the apocalypse of bees, the apocalypse of buses, border fence apocalypse, coat hanger apocalypse, apocalypse in the textbook selective silences. There was the apocalypse of the settlement and the soda machine, the apocalypse of the settlement and the jars of scalps. There was the bedlam of the cannery, the radioactive rain, the chairless martyr demanding a name. I was born from an apocalypse, and I've come to tell you what I know, which is that the apocalypse began when Columbus praised God and lowered his anchor. It began when a continent was drawn into cutlets. It began when Kublai Khan told Marco, begin at the beginning. By the time the apocalypse began, the world had already ended. It ended every day for a century or two. It ended, and another ending world spun in its place. It ended, and we woke up and ordered Greek coffees, drew the hot liquid through our teeth as everywhere the apocalypse rumbled. The apocalypse remembered our dear beloved apocalypse. It drifted slowly from the trees all around us, so loud we stopped hearing it.